I need some coffee. All right. And where are my glasses? Ah. The End Band. Track 5. Facebook updates. Like Peter's profile. What's going on in the world, Peter? Read article. Sounds good. Bye. Google search. Political opinions in Syria. Ugh. It's time. Hey, what's happening here? What a spooky bookstore. Didn't I just buy this book on Amazon? And hey, that's the jacket a friend suggested me on Facebook. Whoa! That's the coffee shop where I major of on Foursquare. And is this my iTunes playlist? Where am I? What happened to my street? Are all these my researches from yesterday? Everything seems to be public. Does everybody see that? Or is this my personal reality?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the presenter of this year's Future Talk, Conny Schümoch.
Wonderful good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That's a question, isn't it? What is real? What is virtual? What is virtual reality? What is reality that is drifting into virtuality? Well, there's one thing for sure, ladies and gentlemen. You are here tonight. It's the 9th of October. It's Tuesday. And ladies and gentlemen, we are probably in one of the most beautiful event locations Vienna has to offer, here in the Spanish riding school in the Hofstall. So that's in the Stahlburg. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much, Telekom Austria, for making it possible to meet here yet again for the 12th Future Talk, ladies and gentlemen. The 12th Future Talk, and that, I think, is an absolute achievement. Me, myself, and I know that the older generation amongst us would associate that with the song of Joan Armatrading. This is not necessarily the topic of tonight. It's a question of the mirror. You know, right at the moment we have these Hollywood movies all to do with Snow White, and you know that the Queen always asks, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? And she gets one of two sets of answers. If we ask the internet today, if we Google our name today, we will find many, many answers. And actually, if you compare one or two of them, they will not have one person in the middle. You might think you're many-faceted. Questions like these are the ones that we're going to be discussing tonight. We have three absolutely fantastic speakers here, and we have the host of the evening. Ladies and gentlemen, will you welcome on stage Hannes Ametsreiter, CEO of Telekom Austria, and the host of this evening. Thank you so much. It's absolutely fantastic to see you again. And Hannes, we've made a rule. Have you switched off your mobile phone?
I don't have it with me.
That's wonderful.
For a few minutes, that's a lot.
That's right. You don't actually have to switch it off. You just sort of don't have to take a movie of this. It's just like it's in the opera or in a film theater. So this is just entre nous, and also for all the people who are watching us on the internet right at this moment. Now, Hannes, I mean, this question that we have set ourselves to answer tonight, you know, how does the internet shape your thinking? Can I just play that off on you? How does the internet shape your thinking?
before coming to the answer of this question, and we like challenging topics, we are used to them, and we also have a topic here which is a quite challenging one, I would like to welcome you to this 12th Future Talk. 12 in a row, it's quite some future talks about different topics, always interesting speakers, and I don't want to overpromise, but I believe the topic is an interesting one, and having you all here is a great pleasure for us. On behalf of Telecom Austria Group, I would like to welcome you. I am very delighted to also welcome the Minister Hunsdorfer, who joined this event and meeting. Welcome. We're also happy to have the future CEO of ÖAG here, Rudolf Kemmler. Thank you for joining our event. But coming to the question which you had, I believe, me, myself, and I, how is the internet shaping our thinking? What is reality? What is real? What is not real? We had a lot of discussions already before. And if you look at the internet, how it is shaping our normal day, it's shaping it a lot. Sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes not. I believe that focusing on that question is an interesting one because it's really showing, and we made a study that if certain people are Googling, they are or searching, they are getting different results. So I mean, that's one aspect of what is real, what is reality. And for us, it is important to understand because we are happy that everybody is having our access, our smartphone. Of course, we would like to convince people to buy our products. On the other hand, it's a discussion of society. How are we developing? How are we shaping? What is influencing us and others? And this discussion at the podium should contribute to that question and giving us some more clarity on this not easy question. And I just want to quote one figure. If I look at how many people are using Facebook, it's 900 million people using Facebook. If this would be a country, this would be the third biggest country in the world. So it's huge. It's a topic for everybody. And that's how the internet is shaping, and that's why we took the topic, and that's why we want to discuss it.
It's one of the aspects that we're going to be talking about. Almost a million users on Facebook. It's 1/7 of this globe. So quite a number of people. What rules and regulations are there, and what are in national countries? But the one thing is, why we're talking about this, it follows up of a number of Future Talk issues. You had as a guest here one of the co-founders, Tim Berners-Lee, last year. We actually had him here together, and we talked about the shaping of the internet. That's been 20 years in the coming. But the last 10 years have been particularly impressive. Do you feel that in your own personal life? I.e., would you say that your own personal life is now completely different from 10 years ago, even though you are in an industry that is so closely related and in fact the enabling?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I would say no, then I believe I would be the wrong person. But yes, if you just look at devices, we all still know the monochrome displays and feature phones which we had 7-10 years ago. Now it's a smartphone. It's about colorful displays, it's about applications, multi-millions of applications, and it's so simple how it changes a situation. When I was last time in London, I was trying to find the way to a restaurant, and I was walking. I was using my smartphone, and it was showing me the way to this restaurant, because it's a few hundred meters or kilometer, 2 kilometers walk, and so I mean, this is improving life. This is changing something. This was not possible 10 years ago. And so I believe it's on the one hand driven by devices, new devices coming up, and certain companies really shaped our industry also. On the other hand, it's also content. Content is getting more and more seamless, content is floating, and content is exploding, and also data volume. And that's of course having impact on infrastructure, but also on the usage and on the media consumption, which is completely different from years ago.
big data, data mining will sort of flow into our discussions later on. But I know that you always, as a company, do a really, really good preparation for this future talk. You have actually initiated a study this year that is asking, or that has been asking Austrians what exactly they perceive the internet to do for them and how they were able to sort of determine their own searches. Were Austrians as a whole aware that there is a filter bubble?
Not enough. And we'll have the discussion later on. What we did was a little study, well, medium-sized study, trying to understand what are search engines delivering to different people using different IP addresses. Is there any difference or not? So what is real? What is reality? And we found out that it's different content. So if person A is searching, then this person is getting certain content based on what he searched before, and the same for other people. So I mean, this is what Eli is saying, that we are living in a bubble. So what we are getting is what we accept, and 43% of all Austrians, they didn't know that content is changing, and that other people might get different content when they are searching. So it's very much, I believe, and that's an interesting discussion which we also had before, where is transparency? Is it transparency with the one person who is giving a lot of information, this one single person, the human being giving the information, or is transparency with the company collecting all the information? I believe it's an interesting discussion to find out, I mean, what the trend is, where is it going to, and do we have a benefit or not?
We will find out during the course of the night. Thank you very much for giving us such a high-profile beginning to the whole show. We'll be seeing each other again in a moment. Thank you. It's wonderful that you're here.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I can't help it. Last year I talked about the horses that are hiding away again here tonight, and I'm very sure that you can smell it. And of course the horses don't have anything to do with the internet yet. However, and this is one of those funny stories that you read, in this case in the International Herald Tribune. Did you know that the cows in Switzerland are no longer living in an IT-free zone? Well, in some cases, they have implants that send SMSs to their owners the moment that particular cow is on heat, so that the owner can easily get a ball or an injection to this particular cow. So, I mean, the Internet of Things, the Internet of Animals, and the Internet of People. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to welcome as our first of three fabulous speakers, and then, of course, later on the panelists, Jared Cohen, who is with Google. He is director there of a wonderful institution called Google Ideas, and he's got many, many, many feathers to his hat. He's been working with the US administration, both under Condoleezza Rice and then later on also with Hillary Clinton. Then he changed tack and said, no, I'm going to influence the world in a different way. How he sees the world and how maybe Google and Google Ideas see the world, we will be hearing now in the next 10 minutes. Jared, take the podium.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. It really is an honor and a privilege for me to be here. And when I look around this room and I see what's surrounding us, I can't help but to say, ladies and gentlemen and distinguished white horses, thank you for having me here today in Vienna. When I thought about this topic of me, myself, and I immediately began reflecting on the last 10 years and thinking to myself, who we are, what our identity is, it all used to be so simple. We were physically in control of what we said and did. If we said something stupid, we could hope that people would forget it, or at least try to reinvent history and say, no, we didn't say that. 99.9% of us were not public figures. We had to go to information, as opposed to information coming to us. When we went home at night, we could look in the mirror and know that we were in full control, or at least partial control. So somewhere along the lines, things have just gotten a lot more complicated. In the future and in the present, we're going to increasingly split our lives between the physical and the virtual world. And our behavior in both may not be exactly the same. Now let me illustrate this first with a very obvious fact, which is there's currently 7+ billion people living on Earth. But let me ask all of you in the audience, with a show of hands, how many of you have multiple email accounts? Raise them high. How many of you have a Facebook account? How many of you use Google+? How many of you use YouTube? How many have a LinkedIn account? Thank you for demonstrating what virtual population growth looks like in the present and the future. The number of virtual citizens will far exceed the number of physical individuals on Earth, and each one of you just demonstrated that you have a virtual entourage. Each email, each account is another identity that you're uploading information for, using to communicate, using to interact, using to share, using to like, using to engage in any number of activities. What this means is a cumulative narrative of who you are is emerging online. And so you're going to start to see it become increasingly difficult to control that desire to put more data about yourself out in the public domain. We went from very few of us being public figures to now all being public figures. And for those of us that are familiar with the concept of don't put anything in email that you don't want to see on the front page of a newspaper, well, that not only applies to all of us now, but it also applies to what we say and share about the people in our own network. But let's not be too worried about this yet. First of all, companies are hard at work at ensuring that they exceed expectations in protecting your security and your data. More than 90% of user-generated data, more than 90% of data is user-generated, and so privacy will be a shared responsibility between users and companies. Some of the world's best engineers are hard at work on things like two-factor authentication, and strong encryption will certainly be almost ubiquitously adopted to ensure protection. But there's also reason to be hopeful about this data revolution. No opinion in the future will go unchallenged. You'll have at your disposal a world of diversified opinion. You'll be able to be more efficient. You'll be able to be more independent. You'll be able to remove certain barriers of entry that previously prevented you from being involved in discussion. But let me also make another point, which is, I think back to my time as a grad student at Oxford, and one of the things that I was told is never accept a question or a concept on an exam. Always dig into it and say what's fundamentally wrong with it. So we were given this concept, me, myself, and I would argue that the fundamental flaw in this concept is to assume that it's uniform and to assume that context doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do is spend my remaining time with you going through a few contexts and explaining how me, myself, and I as a concept changes depending on what kind of individual you're talking about. Now, before I show the next slide, how many of you in the room are parents? Big show of hands. How many of you in the room hope to be parents? Come on, the numbers should be more than that. So let's talk about teenagers. We've all seen young kids playing around with their iPads and fiddling around with various devices. Teenagers have a rebellious spirit, and a rebellious spirit that in the future will be increasingly documented and follow them around for the rest of their lives. Now, there's positive sides to this, which is young people, from the time that their parents post a picture of them as a sonogram in their mother's belly, will develop a cumulative narrative of their complete life. They won't forget anything. They'll be able to remember their first steps. They'll be able to remember the first goal they scored on the football field. They'll be able to remember the first day at school. These are all very important aspects for a young person having a more data-rich life. But as I mentioned, we all know some of the pitfalls and challenges with teenagers. They will live faster online than their physical maturation process will actually allow them to in the real world. So, a 9-year-old isn't going to get into a nightclub, but online, harder to control what that young person might say, do, and who they might interact with. So herein lies a complication, which if we know that teenagers in the future are going to increasingly use technology and increasingly say and do things online before they have any sense of judgment or knowledge about what to do, what do all of you in the room who raised your hand saying you had kids or want to have kids do about this? Well, the first thing you could do is use a very old-fashioned tactic of talking to your kids. The question is, talk to your kids about what? I would argue that in the present and in the future, you will have to talk to your kids more about you'll have to talk to your kids about privacy and security before you even have talks with them about safe sex. They'll be online before any of that is relevant. I also argue that maybe in some cases, insurance companies will put out policies that compensate parents against what their children do online impacting their reputation. It's possible that legislators in some democratic societies will try to pass laws that look at timestamp data and say that if content was put out on the public domain before somebody's 18th birthday, it can't be used in whether or not they are allowed to rent this apartment or whether or not they're allowed to get this job. Now, what about the dissident? The dissident of the future will live an interesting life. Their identity will both be physical and virtual, and in the spirit of behaviors not necessarily being the same, in the physical world, they could choose to mount no protest, while in the virtual world, they could be far more virtually courageous, speaking out against their government, calling for more civil liberties. The dissident of the future will be allowed to have more options. They can be a dissident on their lunch break, or they can be a dissident full-time. But there's challenges with being a dissident as it pertains to this concept of me, myself, and I. Governments will practice two domestic policies, one for the physical world, one for the virtual world, and they may not be the same. So in the physical world, a dissident may face harsh crackdown or arrest or abuse, while in the virtual world, their government may allow them to feel a false sense of freedom and engage in virtual venting. Governments may decide that instead of showing up at a dissident's doorstep at 3 a.m., they're better off virtually doing so, commandeering the camera on their laptop and listening to everything that they say and watching everything they do. And by the way, that technology already exists today. But the reason I'm optimistic about the concept of me, myself, and I for the dissident of the future is they'll have more tools at their disposal, more options and ways to mount a meaningful protest, and more individuals and entities to connect to than ever before imaginable. Now, what about the disabled? This past weekend, I met a couple who told me about their daughter who has a very severe case of autism. And they mentioned that in the physical world, she really struggled because she was judged by her peers, she was made fun of, she had a hard time making friends. But she was actually very articulate about her views on things, extremely sharp. And on the internet, she had 50,000 friends. And she was able to interact with all kinds of people. And she was able to build this virtual confidence that actually ended up spilling over into the physical world and gave her more confidence that allowed her to make friends both virtually and physically. Phenomenal opportunities that level the playing field in the future. Evildoers, terrorists, criminals. In the future, some of these individuals will have the option of waging an attack in the physical world and the virtual world. It may become easier to engage in criminal or violent activity. But ultimately, the evildoers will have a harder time getting caught up in this world of me, myself, and I, virtually and physically, because they will have no choice but to opt into technology. What that means is the room for error will be far greater. I heard a story in Afghanistan about a senior al-Qaeda commander, which means he was about 26, who had been watched for about 5 or 6 years and had not made a single professional mistake. But ultimately, he was caught when he sent a message to a friend of his in Pakistan, socially saying he was looking forward to attending his wedding. So the violent person or the criminal of the future is more likely to make a mistake as they increasingly have to use technology. And that's good for those of us on the side of freedom and hopefully countering violence. And then the last group that I'll mention is the excluded. The level playing field will become a very serious reality in the future. Individuals who maybe lack a certain level of education, lack a certain level of real-world experience, are disenfranchised. Even they will be able to purchase goods online. Even they will be able to access certain information about health online. The world isn't perfectly egalitarian in the new digital age, but those who have been excluded will have an extra edge. And finally, what does this mean for all of you as a conclusion? I was asked to discuss the concept of me, myself, and I, but instead I'm going to sort of, reframe this as a question, which is, as we think about who we are in a world where we split our time between the physical and virtual worlds, the way we need to think about our identity is as a management task. This cumulative narrative will continue to exist. We will continue to put more information about ourselves online. It's up to us as humans to manage it, to use our judgment, and to do what we can to influence that narrative that will ultimately have more of an impact on how the world defines us than perhaps even our physical identity. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's really good. This man really draws one off one's feet, ladies and gentlemen, and we still haven't had the intellectual firework on 2 feet, and he's just coming up, ladies and gentlemen. If we talk about me, myself, and I, who would you choose as a professional to analyze that? Well, you would first of all ask a philosopher, right? And then secondly, you would ask a psychoanalyst. And here we have it, you know, the 2 products in one. One of the best known psychoanalysts of today, one of the best known philosophers of today. He can write and talk about anything, but I tell you what, he's going to blow you away in the next 10 minutes. Slavoj Žižek.
Thank you. Well, basically, I will just tell 2 stories to ruin our pleasure here. I like to be a pessimist. First, it was already mentioned here, this idea of a mirror, what do we see in mirror? I think that in order to get the effect of our virtual identities, we should maybe turn around the topic of vampires. You know what's the myth about vampires? You see them only in reality, you don't see them in the mirror. But I think that there is a much more interesting opposite myth about some invisible demons whom you can see only in the mirror. Like I remember, I forgot the title when I was young, a horror movie where somebody is standing in front of the mirror and sees behind him some kind of a monster. He turns around, nobody there in reality. Something structurally similar happened a couple of years ago, of all places, in Sarajevo, Bosnia. It was reported in the media. There was a couple, whose marriage was taking a wrong turn, so they were more and more alienated to each other, and each of them took refugee, husband and wife, in virtual, well, not sex, but flirting, engaging in a romance. Then, at the end, they decided it's time to meet in real life. And, well, it's a cheap paradox. You can guess what happened. It was the same couple. Now, the enigma for me here is, and that's the problem of me, myself, and I. What happened then? I tried to find out, I was not able to do it. Namely, was there a happy ending? Like, there we discovered that we really love each other, now we can incorporate that in our life. Or was, and unfortunately I find this much more credible, or was there precisely a catastrophe? In the very precise sense of, I spilled out, in my emails to a virtual person, I was so open, telling publicly all the dreams. You see, this is the monster behind my back that only you can see. All my dreams that I cannot endure somebody in real life to live with who knows so much about me. Let me now tell you the first story, which is one which may sound optimistic, but I see bad elements in it, dangerous elements. It's a story about a technological invention. It was reported, I read about it in the media some 2-3 years ago at MIT, you know, Harvard, United States, in their digital lab. Somebody, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, an Indian scientist, proposed a very interesting device, and it's shocking how at a certain level it already works. It's called Sixth Sense, like, you know, the Bruce Willis movie where precisely he doesn't exist in real. Okay, it's this. It's technologically, it may appear simple. You need a camera, you need a small projector, and all are connected to a strong cell phone, which is, of course, connected to internet. So it works like this. I mean, I've seen a film about it, and you have to see it to believe it, how efficient it is. You walk on the street and you see something. The machine, camera, and then internet machinery behind is intelligent enough to identify that object. Let us say it's a certain book. Then it instantly gets back from the net data about that book, which are then projected on any flat screen instantly in front of you. Like you are in a bookstore. You have a book in your hand, and instantly it appears of it, for example, the main reviews of the book or whatever. Or even the machine works in a crazy way. For example, it is recognize, I don't know, you do like this, it means take a camera. Take a photo. You don't have to do anything or whatever. Now, it sounds perfect, even as a sex, male chauvinist, or why male, I can imagine a wonderful sexual use. You know, like you look at a girl and immediately it appears on the screen. Likes romantic talk, likes cunnilingus, doesn't like that, and so on, and you get the whole program. It sounds nice, but it's not, because just think about it. It's, in a way, a return to pre-modern era, whose definition is that it's not that here are we, with our subjective values, dreams, and out there is reality. We are returning to a universe where that's the illusion, the charm of this machine, where reality itself appears to talk to us back. You know, you look at something and as it were it presents itself to you. A book, a building, or whatever. And the problem is what? The problem is that this, what you get, as it were written on the object, the message, is, of course, ideologically overdetermined. It's ideology. In what sense? Doesn't racism function, just think about it, precisely in the same way? Just that it's not a physical machine, but your mental machine. You see a Jew, an Arab, a black African, and the way you perceive him or her, it's as if your ideological machine project onto him or her all your prejudices. You see whatever. A Jewish exploiter, an Arab terrorist, a black lazy rapist, or whatever. What I want to say is that it all amounts to who in this falsely transparent world. I say falsely transparent because, you know, a world no longer appears as unknown objects, but it is as if objects talk back to you presenting themselves. The problem is, of course, who controls the machine and so on and so on. Again, I'm not against this, I see a problem. Second story, I warn you, unfortunately, much darker. Something that happened 3 years ago, I was informed by a Chinese friend in Nanjing, in China. It's such a weird story that you have to hear it, documented, read about it to believe in it. An old woman fell from a bus, and a young guy who was standing behind her, a kind of a yuppie, relatively rich probably, saw her laying down with her broken hip and out of sympathy stepped down and helped her up. When he saw she is seriously wounded, he took her with a taxi to the hospital and gave her some money. Okay, what happened is that 2 weeks later, he got a letter from police. This woman was prosecuting him, claiming that he helped her because probably he pushed her off the bus with no proof. And then, now comes the sad message, the thing went to the court, and the court gave right to the woman. And the words of the court are unique. They said, basically, but literally, No normal person would have helped an old woman like that. So if the guy helped her, it must have, so he got a prison sentence of half a year plus a couple of 10,000 of Chinese money as a punishment. Now, when this story became public, people got aroused and they made wide opinion poll, and they asked literally around 1 million in a quick series of interviews of young people, how would you react if you were to see an old person dying there on the street? Not somebody beating the person so that you would have thought, maybe it's better for me not to get messed into it since the guy who was beating that person, maybe. No, the old person is alone, just obviously heavily wounded. It was quite a shock to learn that 87% of young people said we would ignore it. They asked them why, then they specified that they would first look around if there is the camera, CTV or what, no? And that they would help the person only if they notice the camera there. Now, my point here is not to make fun of China. I think they are no less decent there than other people. I think that the crucial feature here is the change, and here I think we have the effect of digital media, the change status in our perception or experience of what counts as public space. I think that under the influence of digitalization, where when we are, even if it's Skype, internet contact with other people and so on, we are not alone, of course. We are in communication with others, but nonetheless, this space remains in a sense private. You can be in a crowd, but still experience yourself as being in a private space. It is something more is needed. In this case, the public control camera to make the change from private to public space. There is another, much more amusing but also sad phenomenon which I think proves my point. So I was told, the latest trend in hardcore pornography. It is the popularity of so-called, I was told, public sex. And I always thought that hardcore pornography is extremely interesting precisely because it's falsely open. You think, ooh, I can do everything there. No, you cannot do it. It's the most censored medium, I think. You don't believe me? Let me draw your attention to one feature which I wonder if you had the misfortune of looking at hardcore pornography, if you noticed it. You cannot just show copulation, you need a story, no? But did you notice how utterly stupid, as a rule, that story is? Like I remember when I was young, even now I'm embarrassed. One of my first hardcore movies is when, you know, the standard one, housewife alone at home, how do you call it? The plumberer comes and says, lady, I fixed the hole in the kitchen. And then housewife said, well, I have another hole to be fixed. Can you? It's embarrassing. Then the idea came to me. This is not an effect of the fact that they are so stupid. I think there is silent censorship here, in the sense of, if you see it all physically, sex organs penetrating, then we should block the narrative emotional identification. The story should be stupid. If the story is serious, then you are not allowed to see it all. You cannot have both an engaging, emotionally engaged story with it. Then, okay, I will not bore you with going further, but the latest installment in this saga, I claim, is public sex. Especially popular it is, don't ask me why, I was told in hardcore made in Poland and Hungary. And what shocked me, friends showed me a couple of cases, is how, and I mean real public places, not a park, but like a streetcar, the middle of a busy train station, railway station, is how after the first shock, all ordinary people around, they pretend, or even they do, ignore it. It is as if and again, sex is done very openly there, not in a discreet way. It's as if it's still their private space, we will ignore it. So with this, I will conclude with this formula. Today, we often claim how, with our total exposure to the media, culture of public confessions, instruments of digital controls, and so on, the public space is disappearing. I claim no, private space is disappearing. Everything we do is potentially public. I claim no, a much deeper tendency is that the public space is disappearing. Even when we are in public, we are still perceived as like really remaining in private space. Which is why I claim, for example, if you post your photos, I don't, naked sex photos on internet, it's not the same as the old-fashioned exhibitionism, the legendary gesture of opening your coat. This exhibitionist gesture is opening yourself to the public. Putting your photos there, it is circulation, intersubjectivity, and so on, but in a way, it is still a private space. And this is, for me, if you ask me, one of the main challenges on the digital world. How to, because this is, for me, my way of putting what now the next speaker will talk about, bubbles, and so on. How to form, how to constitute in digital media an authentic public space. Because all this Facebook stuff and so on, it's still private narcissistic individuals mirroring the others. The others are me and myself, the other. You can find this even in sex. What is the main effect of digital media in sex? It's the rise of these dating and marriage agencies. Do you know the paradox here? What they offer? Unfortunately, in German, you don't use the word fall, to fall in love. In French, tomber à l'amour, and in English, fall in love, they do. You know what's now the popular formula with these agencies? I found a couple of them in France and in the United States. They use it. It's, we will enable you to find yourself in love without the fall, without this opening to the other. You know, you will remain in your bubble, protected, just the agency will find the partner, and so on and so on. And I think we can go even further here. And now I will nonetheless stop where things become interesting. Did you notice how in matters of sex, also, this idea of passionate love sex or opening to the other is getting out of fashion? Let me give you a proof here. The lowest commercial culture. Okay, this one is not so low. Did you notice something strange about the last James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace? It's not so bad, politically very progressive. Basically, James Bond saves the Morales regime in Bolivia from some bad company. But did you notice a strange thing? At the end, no sexual act. The first Bond film where at the end there is no, or now let's go to real low culture. Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, and so on. Did you notice there, no sex between hero and the heroine? There is sex up there. I mean, Jesus Christ, we learn, was married with Mary Magdalene. But it is as if the sex up there is here only to mask the fact that there is no sex here, and so on. So again, I think that this is not in the nature of internet. No, internet is an open machine. Its social effects can be this or that. It's a it's the field of struggle. But the way our social relations are structured, internet can serve as a strong tool towards this assertion of isolated narcissistic personalities and so on and so on. What I would like to have is an internet where you can fall in love or whatever. And we have to fight for that. Thanks very much.
Did I promise too much? Firework it was. Thank you so much. And we're going to come to our third speaker. And Eli, if you come up right now, he's actually the man that we've mentioned a couple of times. He's the man of the bubbles. He's the man who created the term filter bubble. How he got to the idea of actually finding out about the filter bubble. Looking at your age, you probably were just born when the internet was just about to start. Then you started a big movement, moveon.org. You were sort of a political activist on the internet. You used the internet. And then you suddenly thought, there's something wrong here. Please share your story with us and take us along into the bubble and maybe out of it. Eli.
Good evening. Very difficult people to follow in different ways. But I want to start with a question. What is the most valuable commodity that exists in the 21st century? I'd argue that the most valuable commodity that exists is attention. This is the sort of gold rush of the 21st century. How do we get more attention? Attention converts into purchases. Attention converts into loyalty. Attention is the sort of scarce resource that is driving the information economy. And it's really a very simple equation when you think about it. Attention per human has remained constant, while things to pay attention to has gone up and up and up. And that's sort of the core problem. How do we sort through this enormous amount of information that we are confronted with? Jared's boss, Eric Schmidt, has a favorite story that he tells about this, which is that if you were to take all of the information created by all of humanity from the beginning of time until 2003, you'd have about 5 exabytes of data. That's 5 really, really large amounts of data. And the problem that we have right now is that 5 exabytes of data pour online every 2 days. So we're awash in data, and we're looking for ways of sorting through this very fast-running stream and making meaning out of it. And that's where algorithms come in. A long time ago, in the early days of the internet, some clever engineers working for companies like Amazon realized that you could start to kind of group people and group products in clusters. And that if you ran some fairly simple statistics, you could suggest that if you like this, you'll like that. We've all seen this in practice. And the interesting thing about running these kinds of analytics is that you begin to notice patterns that transcend the domain of the products. In other words, if you like this book, you'll like this movie or this piece of clothing. And you also begin to notice patterns that most people wouldn't. For example, Netflix likes to talk about, there's a close correlation between 2 movies, The Wizard of Oz, and you can probably guess the other movie that people who like The Wizard of Oz also really like. It is, of course, Silence of the Lambs. So we wouldn't normally guess that those 2 things had anything to do with each other, and yet, as it turns out, people who like one like the other. Now, what's happening now is that this process, which originated in commerce and selling products, is beginning to move into our media. And we're beginning to move from a world where if you like this book, you might like this other book, or if you like this product, you might like this other product, to if you like this news story, you might like this other news story. And maybe even if you like this idea, you'll like this other idea. If you like this fact, you'll like this other fact. And that's where things start to get complicated. My thesis, simply with the filter bubble, is that increasingly we live in our own kind of personal information universe, which has been generated for us by the code of these websites who are trying to show us things that they think we're going to be interested in. The key word here is relevance. They want to show us things that are more relevant for us. But as these services increasingly determine what we pay attention to, that is, after all, where the big financial opportunity is, we need to ask, how that filter is constructed. How are they deciding what is relevant and what is not? What does it mean that we are increasingly outsourcing our attention to a piece of code which at the end of the day is paid for by advertisers? These are the questions that I think we need to really grapple with. It's not only the questions of privacy, what can people know about me? It's sort of the reverse. What can I know about the world? What is the world that Google or Facebook is presenting to me? As you mentioned, Google increasingly shows different search results to different people. This is a big shift, right? In the early days of the web, the story of Google was that it was using this sort of uniquely democratic algorithm to let the web vote consensually on which topics were most relevant for which search services. Now, instead of having one sort of result for everyone, we all get our own results based on what Google thinks that we're most likely to click on. And it raises some interesting problems. For example, if I'm a 9/11 conspiracy theorist and I believe that it was an inside job, what's most relevant to me? Is it Google's job to show me the article that suggests that I'm wrong? Or Google's job to show me the article I'm looking for that reinforces what I already believe? I just quickly want to talk about two of the challenges in this kind of personalized media world. The first is what the anthropologist Dana Boyd called the psychological equivalent of obesity. This is basically best illustrated by some research on a popular movie renting service in the United States, where people select certain movies to come into the queue, and as they move up to the top and move out to people's houses, you can kind of rearrange them. So you first decide, oh, I want to see this movie sometime, and then you decide, I want to see this movie now. And these researchers were looking at how different movies moved through the queue. So as it turns out, different movies moved at very different speeds, and if you graphed them in terms of the amount of time that a movie spent in the queue, you got kind of this interesting set of clusters. Over here were the set of want movies. These are the movies that spent a short amount of time moving through the queue. The Quantum of Solace was probably one of them. A lot of summer blockbusters, a lot of romantic comedies. And over here, you can kind of imagine probably what these movies are, right? This is documentary film. This is almost all of French cinema. These are the movies that people aspire to have watched someday, but don't want to watch right now. Now, I would argue that's really important, that question of the aspirational self. And part of what's going on here is that because a lot of these algorithms really just look on what I'm clicking first, or what I'm clicking like on Facebook, they miss the difference between the behavioral self, the one that's doing the clicking, and the aspirational self. I think the great media of the 20th century has helped us balance those two selves. You get a little bit of information dessert with your information vegetables, and you get a balanced diet. But I'm not sure that that's the world that we're seeing through Facebook and Google and other technologies these days. The second way in which these filters distort our sense of the world is that there are certain kinds of information that are just more likely to get through them than other kinds. So for example, on Facebook, the primary way that you signal that something should be shared through the network is you click like on it. And like is a very particular word. It has a positive valence. It's easy to click like on, I just ran a marathon. And it's hard to click like on the war in our fur ends, continues into its 11th year. And so certain kinds of information find it very easy to propagate on Facebook, while other kinds of information don't. The concern here is that the public sphere, as we know it, this place where important ideas get out to citizens, begins to disappear, awash in a endless stream of cat videos and celebrity news and all of the normal stuff that we spend our time on online. And so what this suggested to me at a core level is that I grew up as an idealist about the internet. I was really excited about the prospect that this technology would transform society and democratize things, that it would take all of these gatekeepers, these elites who sat at the printing press deciding what got to get printed and what didn't, and it would brush them out of the way, and we would move into this new disintermediated society where we could all communicate easily with each other. That was really kind of the view that I bought into. But I want to suggest that that's actually totally wrong. We don't live in a gatekeeperless society right now. The way to get attention in the 21st century is through the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers control what people pay attention to, and their Google, and their Facebook, and their Twitter. And they shape what we know about and what we don't. They rank sources of information. They decide. They make many of the same editorial decisions that the 20th century gatekeepers did. But many of them do so without a sense of editorial ethics that's similar to the 20th century version. When I asked Facebook about this, they said, we don't see promoting important information as part of our job. And I think this is a real problem because where it leaves us is potentially cocooned in our own information environments, being fed information back to us. It's sort of, as Mr. Žižek would say, it's a parallax problem. You get your own point of view, and if you try to step over here and get a different point of view, the world turns to meet your gaze. It's harder and harder to get out of your own shoes and into someone else's. And I think that's a problem because actually we really need the internet to be as good as we all hoped it would be. We need it, if you think about a problem like climate change, it's going to be almost impossible to solve that problem at a civilizational level without people from many different disciplines, from many different ways of thinking, many different cultures, coming together in kind of some sort of discourse to figure out a way forward. We need the internet to be that connective medium that we always hoped it would be. And I fear that unless this filtering, unless this personalization is done right, we'll instead be left in a filter bubble. And I think that's what we're going to talk about now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eli. May I invite all of you gentlemen to come and join me back up on stage. I think, Eli, that's your space over there. And of course you can change in the meantime, but for now that should be, for the next hour, that should be it. Hannes, maybe in the middle? That would be lovely. I think Eli, you're, Slavoj, you're there, and which means that you're next to me. That is not a threat, it's also not a promise. So, Eli, can I just come back on what you were saying? You were talking about the responsibilities that are not quite clear, and maybe I would sort of do the first round on that. You say these big organizations, whether it be Amazon, Facebook, we leave out Google for the time being, sort of reflect and also do editorial jobs without the editorial ethics. Now, in former times, when we actually read a paper, we also got views. What's the difference in the internet?
Well, I think first there's a difference as a consumer, which is that when I pick up a newspaper or magazine, I kind of know what the editorial viewpoint is, and as a result, I can infer from that what is likely to appear and what is likely not to appear. I know if I turn on Fox News in the United States, I'm not likely to hear good things about Obama, which may not have any representation, and in fact doesn't have any representation to whether there is good news about Obama. The challenge with personalized media is that because the system by which things are sorted is opaque, and again, this differs from company to company, but very few of them offer a very transparent algorithm for how this is all done. Because that system is opaque, you don't know who Google or Facebook think you are, and therefore you don't know on what basis they're deciding which information you might be interested in. And therefore it's very hard to know what you might be missing. Donald Rumsfeld had the famous sort of, they're the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And I think one of the core problems here is that if you're not careful, you can create a lot of unknown unknowns.
Slavoj will answer that straight away. Let me just quickly tick on the question of responsibility. Most of these oligopolic undertakings, Apple, Google, Facebook, etc., they do have a kind of ethical statement that they give themselves. In how far would these ethical statements reflect what has been criticized by Eli?
Well,
I think the first point to make is you can't generalize about every single company in a series of sort of bumper sticker explanations for what's happening. Every company is different. There's going to be more companies that enter into the fray that will have their own will have their own algorithms and ways of organizing information. I would say one of the things that is truly remarkable is that in today's world we have so much more choice than we had before. And yes, it's worthwhile to debate how to improve the independence of that choice and so forth. But if we're talking about responsibility, I can't help but to sit here and try to imagine what sort of having this exact conversation in a country that has a censored internet would actually sound like, where people are restricted to a world with no critical thinking, where the free flow of information does not exist, where the internet is actually truly filtered. And I just think it's important, I'm not saying this isn't a worthwhile conversation, but it's important if you're going to talk about this, quote, filter bubble, to talk about it in the context of a world where 5 billion new people are coming online, and by the way, largely in countries that have a censored internet.
I think we can go back to that later on, but of course, fortunately, our conversation is taking place in a democratic country with a democratic outlook, both of you coming from America. How do these arguments, Slavoj, sort of touch upon you? And I saw you putting down a couple of notes already, so I know that you've got a couple of ideas on this.
First, I think the problem is the real one, and there is no simple solution. That is to say, okay, gatekeeping and so on, but as it was already emphasized today by you mostly, I think, many times, we have such an overflow of information that the problem today mostly is not how to get the information, but how to reduce the information, how to get rid of even 95% of it and focus on what is really important. And so I think now I will sound very naive and maybe totalitarian, but my formula is not no gatekeepers, but good gatekeepers. We cannot do without them.
How do we get them?
That's a problem. It's a 5 million question on TV, no? Because why? I will explain now why. Who mentioned Rumsfeld, no? You touched now a sensitive point which I always like to repeat. I'm sorry if some of you know it. For me, this moment was wonderful. You remember, Rumsfeld played this game. He was asked basically why to attack Iraq, no? And his idea was, he went into philosophy, as it were. There are known knowns, things that we know, and we know that we know them. Like, I'm in Vienna, I know I'm in Vienna. Then Rumsfeld says, there are known unknowns, things we don't know, but we know that we don't know. Like, I know there are horses behind me. I don't know how many horses are, but I know that I don't know this. And then, that was his metaphysical case, Rumsfeld said, there are also unknown unknowns. Things we even don't know that we don't know them. They are so much out. And his idea was, what if Saddam is hiding something, some really evil plan, weapons or whatever, that we even don't know what we don't know? You know, if you think a little bit, you must have noticed that something is missing here. Known knowns, we know what we know. Known unknowns, we know what we don't know. Unknown unknowns. There is the fourth term, and for me, as a Freudian, the most interesting one. Not the known unknowns, but the unknown knowns. Things that we know in the sense of prejudices, whatever, but we don't know that we know them. You know, that's how racism works. You hate a guy, there is a whole set of... and I think this was Rumsfeld's problem in Iraq, if I may put it so. It was not that Saddam had some mega secret weapons that we didn't know. Americans were obviously led by too many unknown knowns. Things they automatically thought they know, like prejudices about culture, blah, 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 which they were not aware of what they know, that is to say, what the guidance. And I think, again, this is the problem for me in internet. I not claim, when I at least speak about gatekeeping, to avoid a misunderstanding, I'm not the old paranoid leftist who claims there is some censorship meeting once a month in some secret villa between New York and Washington, then near Princeton, and decides what to censor. You know, it's, the horror is that the most efficient censorship is the one which dupes the censors themselves. It's that there is no agent. Another category, and then I will stop, that we would have to introduce here, it always fascinated me, Kafka knew it very well, is that the truly oppressive rules, and this has to be emphasized whenever we talk about censorship, the truly oppressive rules are not just prohibitions, but are prohibitions which are themselves prohibited, in the sense that you have to follow them, but you are not allowed to announce them publicly. An example, and then I shut up. Imagine, it's too beautiful a dream, that we are in Moscow, I'm Comrade Stalin, I finished my speech, you applaud. Then we have a debate. One of you stands up and says, Comrade Stalin was wrong here, it's totally stupid what he said. Okay, we know. Next day, the topic of the week would be who has seen that one the last time. Okay, but let's imagine then that there is another guy who stands up and shouts at the first person, are you crazy? Here, we are not allowed to criticize Comrade Stalin. This guy will disappear even faster. You see the trick? It's not only that you are not free, but you are not allowed to proclaim publicly that you are not free. You have to pretend that you are free. And I hope you are not a boss like this. This, I think, is a difference between, you know, the traditional boss. There is a good point about him. He says openly, I'm the boss, you obey me. A modern boss says, no, I'm really your friend, we are colleagues, I just coordinate things, we can have a drink afterwards, you know, but you still remain the boss.
Wonderful. Slavoj, you have taken us on such a tour d'horizon, and I think Hannes should be able to explain what kind of boss he is before we continue on geopolitical issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how philosophers are creating the truth. So, I mean, that's one aspect which was really interesting to hear. Also interesting to hear on how decision-making was based in some countries, obviously, which you mentioned. Well, I believe, I mean, talking about reality, and Jared said before that we do have the choice. Do we really have the choice? I mean, it is not necessarily the consumer making the decision about what information he receives. It's about some companies deciding. It's about these gatekeepers. One gatekeeper is an algorithm. The other gatekeeper is an editor-in-chief. The other gatekeeper is, I don't know, writing a blog. So I believe I would fully agree that yes, we need very good gatekeepers, absolutely. Who are they? And where are they coming from? And how would I, again, initiate a process to give some power back to the consumer? It now looks like somebody is deciding for the consumer, for the individual, for the human being. And so this is what I'm missing a bit in that discussion, because I believe technology-wise, everything's possible. But I believe to really have the power and to really have choice is important. And I do not see it at the moment to all extent being realized. And it's also an interesting discussion when Viktor Meyer-Schönberger, an Austrian teaching at Harvard, you might know him, and I mean, he once wrote the book Delete. The internet should be able to forget. That's also an aspect. Yes, I mean, it's about taking something out, it is about forgetting, it's about also having some influence and having some power. So I believe that's...
Add one small phrase and then I will shut up. You know what we should not forget?
You don't need to shut up.
It's also that, it's a crucial point, I think, that it's not just bad gatekeepers towards people who want to know. I think quite many of us are corrupted liberals who, let's say, torture in Guantanamo and all that. We don't really want to know the truth, you know. We want the dirty job to be done but we really pretend not to know, prefer not to know it. So, you know, sometimes the true opening is even not just to tell the people what they want to hear, but force them to hear what they don't want to hear.
Okay, there we are at good gatekeepers and good information policy, which takes me to one or two of the points that you've mentioned. You talked about prejudices and you've talked about experiences in Iraq. Let me sort of put that on a different level. Geopolitical challenges, we talked about that earlier. These days you have conglomerates of companies that span the world. Maybe not so much in China, maybe not so much in other countries, but round about the world. And you have national legislation. Sometimes they clash. Who gives in?
I think it's an excellent question. I'll preface my answer with cyberspace gets bigger every single moment of every single day. I think it's safe to describe it as the world's largest ungoverned space. The natural reaction of governments will be to look at the laws that exist within their physical sovereign territories and try to replicate them in cyberspace. For reasons that I don't think I need to explain here, that's very difficult to do.
Jared,
So,
can you say what you mean by ungoverned?
so meaning cyberspace, you know, if I'm in one country and there's a set of laws that individuals in the physical law abide by, it becomes harder when individuals in that country engage in activities and interactions online that span something more transnational. So one country may have strict restrictions of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Yet online, that individual may be able to go beyond the laws and out of the reach of that particular government.
Let's take the concrete example of the Muhammad video that stirred quite a lot of political concern. In some of the countries, Google, Facebook, etc., whoever was furthering the viewing power of that video stepped down. In other countries, not. So what is the decisive factor within big companies to say, okay, fine, well, we're not showing it in Afghanistan, we're not showing it in Pakistan, we're not showing it in Egypt, but the rest of the Muslim world, yes, we're showing it.
Well, I mean, there's two ways to think about this. So YouTube has a very clear set of policies in which it will take down a video, for instance, if it advocates violence. In the case of the video, the facts are we abided by the laws in certain countries and blocked it. And in the case, I believe, of Libya and Egypt, we temporarily blocked it for immediate security concerns. But there's a larger point here. It wasn't YouTube that sort of proliferated this video. The reality is this video existed online for some time. I think many people would agree that who have actually seen the video that there's far sort of more sophisticatedly produced content out on the public domain. What happened was an Egyptian cleric basically fabricated what this video actually was used for and what the content was, and the mainstream media in Egypt then broadcast it. So at the end of the day, two things actually proliferated: a video that, by the way, a large percentage of the people rioting and protesting never saw, same as with the Danish cartoon riots several years ago throughout Europe. It's still word-of-mouth networks and rumor that oftentimes fuel robust reactions and in some cases violent reactions to these things. And the mainstream media will continue to play a very important role because even though new media platforms are the place where you get the most immediate content, we still live in a world where the mainstream media is relied on to validate it.
Do we need other filters worldwide, but transparency about these filters?
It's a really challenging question. Just to to start with the video. I mean, the interesting thing about that video was it wasn't just an Egyptian cleric. It was also a really stupid American who they were playing off each other. It was kind of a duet between two demagogues who were each perfectly playing the role that the other wanted them to play. And so you could almost offer it as kind of counterexample to the argument that I was making, which is, the internet does at times sort of connect some of the worst, stupidest people in one part of the world with the worst, stupidest people in another part of the world, to feed their common misunderstandings. And I think this is part of the challenge of the time that we live in. I think in terms of transparency, this isn't exactly what you were asking, but I think the challenge that we have with this sort of rhetoric around transparency is that it's applied kind of exactly upside down of how it should be applied. So transparency really should vary with power. You want people with a lot of power to be closely scrutinized, but you want people who don't have a lot of power to have a lot of leeway to affiliate and associate without scrutiny, because that's really the only way that you protect the possibility of an upset in power. The age that we live in is kind of the reverse. Ordinary people have an immense amount of scrutiny, an immense amount of transparency, while political leaders and the powerful actually are still quite able to keep things relatively opaque. And yes, we have the sort of open mic moments and that kind of thing, but actually politics happens behind closed doors as much as it ever did. It's very, we're sort of approaching transparency in the exact wrong way.
Thank you so much. Just a quick remark before I would like you to chip in. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a promise. We would like to get you involved in the debate in about 2 to 3 minutes. Or 5, depending on how long Slava will take. This afternoon, Slava, you talked about something that I found very interesting. You said that there is a new authenticism, or that is what I've called it, after you described this role play, i.e. in the internet you can play something that is more your personality than your actual personality out in the real world. Can you take us along that road?
Okay, I don't like to repeat myself, but yes, very briefly, when we adopt, that was the idea, when we adopt a certain screen persona, which, as we say, is not true, when I invent a fictional screen persona, what interests me is that nonetheless, that persona can be in a way more true. This would be my idea of me, myself, and I. Can be more truly myself than I am in my real life. Let's say I'm secretly a pervert sadist who likes to torture and kill people, but in reality I am a modest, weak guy. And all these my brutal impulses, I feel free to enact them in my screen persona precisely because I tell to myself it's just a fiction, it's not a reality, and so on and so on. So in a way, what you see there in the guise of a fiction is closer to the core of myself than my real self. Now, here things are ambiguous. I was always skeptical about this standard complaint, violent video games, they incite violence. No, maybe they even block it, sabotage it by enabling its much more harmless acting out. But I want to make another very brief remark. When you mention this violence, the attempt to control violence, and so on, you see here, for me, the gatekeeping appears at its purest. What is violence? Where do you set the limits of violence? You have, for example, demonstrations in a certain state, then the state reacts and so on. Who will control what's it? And we are all the time confronting this with American intervention, with other interventions. You know what, to what extent, quite often our media blame terrorists for a bomb, then a state bombs the whole villages in the reply, oh, that's not violence. I'm not a priori against this. I'm just saying, let me give you an example. For example of this complicity. I'm totally against Saddam Hussein, no mercy there. But you remember something strange. When there was a trial against Saddam, I remember clearly the list of accusation. And, oh, sorry, his main crime, unambiguously, as to the number of people tortured, died, suffering, economic, was his attack on Iran. Undoubtedly, 1 million people over died there. Although Iranians demanded it, it wasn't even in the list of accusations. Why not? The answer is ABC. Because, and I didn't read this in some stupid leftist 500 copies journal, I read this in New York Times. Because United States discreetly supported Saddam there, providing him with satellite photos of Iranian arms and so on and so on. So like who decides what? The problem is that sincerely, not on account of some cheap moral relativism, I don't see the limits so clearly. So my first point would have been to allow on the web precisely an open space for this debate, what is violent and so on. And don't be afraid. I'm not saying, every resistance, kill Americans is allowed. No.
But I think Jared should answer now.
There's a point I want to make, but let's also, we have to get the facts right. Saddam Hussein was tried in a domestic Iraqi court with an Iraqi judge, not in an international criminal court, and that's why the focus was on the gassing of the Kurds and the massacre of Shia and a variety of other atrocities. But let's just make sure we get the facts right. But the larger point that I want to make is, the video that became so infamous the last few weeks, the Danish cartoon. This won't be the riots in London. This won't be the last set of incidents where technology is part of the narrative about violence. It's very important, though, because there will be an inclination that a lot of people have to blame the technology instead of the humans. At the end of the day, violence is still a crime perpetrated by human beings, and people can try to scapegoat the technology all they want, but at the end of the day, we have to recognize that the technology itself may have an empowerment bias, but it doesn't choose the sides. The people who use it do.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me stick to my promise. There are some ladies on the road with microphones, so they could empower you in pointing forward your ideas. Yeah, the wonderfully white-clad ladies. Anybody with an intervention now? Unfortunately, we have to go back to the ancient raise your hand kind of tactics. Don't see it right at the moment. In that case, Eli, I would like to, if the ladies see one, please raise your arms. Yeah. Eli, first of all, I would like you to continue on that thought, and I would also like to go on to asking, the internet as such is neutral. Yeah. It's just like hot water. You can burn somebody with hot water, or you can make hot tea with it. So,
well, there's a wonderful, it's called Kranzberg's first law of technology. And I actually don't know what his other laws were, but the first one was really good.
As long as we know the first.
Which is, technology is neither good nor evil, nor is it neutral. So, it's what we always have to think about is, what are the valences in this technology that will shape behavior? And there's this kind of constant interplay between technology and the way that we act, between the affordances that a tool offers and how we use it. I think the challenge is that technologists, and I'm not saying that Jared himself has done this, but a lot of the folks behind these companies sort of claim great victories for technology when it's doing something good, and say, it's just, people will use it, however, when it's doing something bad they don't like. And I think we need to sort of hold it to the same standard in both cases. It can't both be changing the world when good things are happening and be this sort of neutral thing when bad things are happening. I don't think you would argue that, but I think that there's a rhetoric around it that fails to recognize that actually, good technologies or technologies that are exciting in some ways have unintended consequences. Just as a final example, most of the internet traffic in the world runs at some point through the U.S. backbone, or a lot of the internet traffic in the world runs through the U.S. backbone. The NSA, the U.S. intelligence agency, according to a lot of credible reports, pulls most of that traffic off of that backbone into centers to sift through it. And so the fact that a lot of Google servers and a lot of other companies' servers are in the United States affords it a certain geostrategic advantage that other countries don't have. It's not like, the CIA said, let's invent Google as a way of collecting information, but it has that consequence actually in a lot of cases.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at the watch, and I'm looking at our first icebreaker, who is somewhere behind there.
communist. You should organize the debate.
The icebreaker is already there.
My question is to Mr. Žižek. When you say that in a pseudo personality character in a game on internet, you can get more close to what you are actually. I read there is in Maine, I think, a candidate, a woman who's been playing such games, and now the Republican Party is attacking her because she posted what she likes to do with her persona. It's this orc thief, and she wrote, I like to stab, I like to poison, and the Republicans are attacking the politician, the political candidate, on the ground of this phantasmatic figure. How do you, I think maybe you would say it's part of her, and actually the Republican in some way are right to attack her because she likes to poison and stab, or would you say how does it work?
You told me about this example, so why don't you answer him?
Which example?
You told me about this example, didn't you already? Before?
I don't think so.
No, because I don't know this example, so I cannot do, I must say, I cannot do a qualified comment here. I'm just saying, just to clarify a misunderstanding, no great point. I'm not saying that automatically when you invent the fiction is more really you than what you are in reality. I mean, one has to look at it closely. On the other, no, it's also the opposite. You know what was my most depressive experience, and I wonder how this dimension will be dealt with in our digital times. How you can have a couple of examples of great spiritual leaders, or rather the other way around, people who did horrible things in real life, but at the same time had an unquestionably authentic spiritual experiences. My great example, maybe you know it. You know, if you are old enough, Daisetsu Suzuki, the great Zen popularizer in the hippie era. You know that he was in the 30s and early 40s a brutal exponent of Japanese militarism, even giving advices to the army of how the Zen Enlightenment makes it easier for you to kill people. He says, if you are still caught in the illusion of agency, then, sorry if I take you as an example, Klassenkampf, you are the boss. If I hit you with a knife and remain within illusionary reality, then I think I did it, and I feel responsible. But he says, if I reach the Buddhist nirvana, or satori, as they call it, I know that the reality is just a game of fleeting appearances. I'm not an agent, as he puts it, Suzuki. My knife dances in the air, and by the same cosmic dance, your body falls on my knife, and so on and so on. So you see or other stories about like Heinrich Heydrich, if there was a bad guy. You know that he in the evenings played with friends Beethoven's late Streichquartetten. It's very difficult to accept how horror in your acts can coexist with, why not, spiritual authenticity. I'm a pessimist here. I think we have to accept this gap.
Thank you so much. That was almost a last word from you. Last word from you, Jared. Also, this afternoon we talked about sort of the potential of a think tank like Google Ideas, i.e. of the use of the internet, of your capabilities, of actually counteracting criminalistic wrongdoing, for example, human trafficking. Just give us one glimpse into a positive future of the data mining that you are capable of doing.
I think one of the most exciting potentials is that individuals empowered with smartphones are going to be able to police the police. I mean, at the end of the day, the most problematic issue in societies ridden with violence is the breakdown of rule of law. Oftentimes the breakdown of rule of law happens because the police are corrupt or ineffective, or there's huge issues of absenteeism. Technology is certainly not a silver bullet answer to that, but given the forthcoming ubiquity of mobile devices and the power of information, I have to believe that it's at least part of the solution.
Data is going to grow. Your organization, MoveOn.org, was actually founded on that solidarity that was used and based and found in the internet. Where's the next big thing? Where's the next big solidarity movement?
Well, I think one of them, one of the biggest questions in front of us right now, I think, as Jared says, we are going to be spending an increasing amount of our time living in virtual space. And I think we really have to examine how we think about that experience, whether we think about ourselves as consumers who are just picking items off of a shelf, or whether we really decide to become citizens of this space and instead of just accepting the media that is put in front of us, work to co-create it. When I look at something like Wikipedia, I see an example of a way to come together using this technology to build something that does have some of those real civic values embedded in them. And I think we need more people to kind of jump in and be part of that process. I think the most exciting technologies are the ones that haven't been built yet that people will design not just to sell some advertising, not just to collect data, but to change the world. And I think there are great companies that have been built on that, and great projects that have yet to be built that I hope folks will get involved with.
Last question to Hannes. Your company, Hannes, has engaged in a number of projects where you actually help the new generation handle technology. How does that work, and why do you do it in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely, because we believe it really develops a country, it develops people, and if we are still talking about and have too many people not being connected to the internet, and 20% in Austria not being connected to the internet. So we are trying to close that gap and connect them. And this still leaves the question open, what happens to these people? How does the internet shape the thinking? What is the influence? And I believe, taking up what you said, Slavoj, before, you are closer to fiction than you sometimes are as a person. And I do remember, like 10 years ago, we had discussions with a company. It was during the internet time. It was a German company, and they were focusing and creating characters, virtual characters. And we were like, yeah, but the name will be Mickey Mouse and nobody knows what they are doing. Is it true? Is it real? And they said, yes, indeed. It is real. Maybe not the name, but it is real because they would like to get connected to the people thinking the same, to get the right travel proposal, to get the right club, to get the right whatever. So it's coming closer to, I'm not using such drastic models and names and examples, but this is why there's a reason, because there's a benefit for the consumers doing so. And so I believe it, of course, needs to be a mixture of service opportunities, and there needs to be a benefit for the person using such systems. And on the other hand, it's connecting people, because if you're not connected, then you are really not connected to the media, to the information, to what you need to live in a modern society which is using information as a very base resource.
Just one sentence.
One
think
sentence.
that what you said reminds me of a wonderful Jewish story, which brings us to this, which is, a rabbi was telling an old legend to a young boy who asked him, is this true? Did it really happen? You know what's the rabbi's answer? It didn't really happen, but it's true, That's what can happen, luckily, in internet.
Slavoj, you were a pleasure to have had on the panel, always
with
wonderful stories.
Pleasure, you would have
the
a heart
thinker
attack.
who is thinking about thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, one round of applause for him. The other applause for Eli Pariser, who's always brought us to the ground. Last but not least, Jared Cohen, who's taken us into a world that has many potentials. Thank you so much. Hannes, I need to take you away. You just stay put for a moment, please. Slavoj, just give us 2 minutes, and then we can all engage in discussion. Now, it's very, very difficult. If somebody has a message, and this guy has a hell of a lot of messages to stop him. Hannes, there was one sort of golden bridge I tried to sort of get you on, and that's called Internet for All. That's what Telekom Austria does. Why do you do it, and who is actually sort of gaining from it?
Yeah, I mean, what I already mentioned before, and I'm talking about Internet for All, it's a program we are running. It's a program, you could call it social program, you could call it education program, but it's connected, connecting the unconnected, to really get people into the internet. So that's one step, giving them access, and the other part is giving them media literacy, so that they really know how to interact with Facebook and Twitter and all this new, well, pretty new applications. So this is what we are doing. We now have a new partner, which is SOS Kinderdorf, and so we really try to bring some other partners into that project, and we try to support and try to develop, because we believe it's necessary.
SOS Kinderdorf is one of the hooks that we still need to talk about. SOS Kinderdorf, ladies and gentlemen, you all know what it is. You are in the room. Hermann Gmeiner founded it. It is generally for young kids without a family. They're being given a family. And what is now new, you have a very special project designed, and ladies and gentlemen, you can contribute. And no, this is not false charity. We had that this afternoon. This is real charity, because you will be enablers for which project?
Well, it is a project that we are supporting SOS Kinderdorf, that we are connecting them, that we are giving them devices, that we are giving them internet access, and that is a project which we already developed also with other partners like Caritas and others. And I mean that's what we can. That's our service. That's our products, and we would like to spread and also want to have others participating and getting some support with. And
in this case, it's even refugee kids who do not, who have arrived here without their parents. So it's doubly important. Why are we mentioning it? Because you might find that on the way out, there are young ladies or gentlemen standing with a box, and you know, it's almost like in church in the earlier years. You know, when you leave, you might think about doing something good for the rest of the evening. The best thing you can do now is relax, talk amongst yourselves, really sort of take some of the ideas, think about the known unknown and the unknown known, and reflect on that. Think about the future of internet, and do enjoy the evening. We've enjoyed having had you here, and we hope that you will enjoy both drinks and conversation. Make it a networking evening. This was Future Talk 2012, and there's going to be one next year?
We think so, yeah.
Definitely
Absolutely.
one next year. Same place, similar time.
Connie, I would like to say thank you for a very charming moderation. We believe it was not an easy panel. It's a challenge with the topic. It's also a challenge with the panel. But thank you very much for the very, very charming moderation. I was also very impressed by the product cows, all the cows in Austria sending SMSs. That's a good one.
That's a good one. I'll show you the article. Thank you so much. Lovely.
Thank you, and enjoy the evening. Thanks.